Hello all, welcome back. This is the German unification, or the unification of Germany, part 2. So, in the last episode, we left you with Prussia being embroiled with the First Danish War. So Bismarck got Austria to join him. So you have like this Grosse Deutsch, big Germany kind of thing going on here, where Prussia, Austria fighting together to seize provinces of Schleswig and Holstein from Denmark. And the Danes are no match for the Germans, and so the spoils are split. Prussia obtained Schleswig, which this is Schleswig, and this is Holstein. And Bismarck really never intended for this actually to work out, where there would be peace between Prussia and Austria. He never wanted to share the provinces. So really what he wants is for more friction. All right, he wants more friction so he can justify a war against Austria. And again, make gains for the excuse, or give himself the excuse for the taxes that technically he's illegally confiscating from the German middle class. And so the next step is, you guessed it, a war, and a war with Austria. So this war becomes known as the 7 Weeks War, because it lasted 7 weeks. But this is roughly around 1866, prior to the birth of the North German Confederation, just saying. But Russia gave Prussia their word that they would be neutral if a war were to break out with Austria. Remember, Russia was still seeking revenge from the Crimean War, where Austria didn't come to Russia's aid, despite the fact that Russia came to Austria's aid in the revolutions and the uprisings in 1848. So Bismarck then also moves to isolate Austria further by buying out Napoleon and getting Napoleon III to cooperate, and he promises Napoleon III land in the Rhineland. And as a good real politician always does, he gets Austria to attack first. If you remember, Cavour got Austria to attack first, so he got Austria to attack first over Schleswig and Holstein. It always seems to pay to get the other guy to start it. So he plays him. He's manipulative. The war only lasts, as I said, 7 weeks. Though brief, the Prussian army is vastly superior. Remember, they have gone through the industrialization process. The year is 1866. A little bit of a push here for you, but Prussia actually sent a lot of military advisors to watch the Union and the Confederacy fight in the United States Civil War. They were at many of our battles, and one of the things they learned from us was how to use the railroad technology to move goods to and from the front. No one really had ever done that in Europe, so this is one of those things that really helped give an advantage to the Prussians against the Austrians. So this only increases Bismarck's confidence as he prepares for the next step. So Prussia goes in and annexes Schleswig-Holstein and the whole kingdom of Hanover, Nassau, Hesse, Kassel, and 18 other German states. So they're annexing them, right? What do they do with them? Well, they've grown, and now they create, and you need to know this, so make sure you have this, in 1866, there's now a North German Confederation. There's no official union, but basically the northern Protestant states kind of semi-unify under this notion of being the Northern German Confederation. So again, Bismarck's running the show. He actually went against King William here. King William wanted harsher surrender terms to embarrass the Austrians, and Bismarck said, no, we take what we want. We may need them in the future. Again, he didn't really make Austria hand over any land. Austria only lost Venetia and then Holstein, and was really just excluded from the North German affairs. Again, please remember, he's going to need them at some other time, so don't burn any bridges. So, that's pretty much what we got going on. The war has benefits for another country, Italy. Because Austria was defeated, Italy moved to absorb Venetia, an important step in finishing up its unification process. And if you remember, we've already talked about that in the presentation on the unification of Italy. So the success here makes Bismarck really look like a genius, all right? And we've already talked about this, but the German Confederation is an important step towards unification. The King of Prussia was at the head of the North German Confederation. It had a parliament with 2 chambers. The lower chamber was elected by universal male suffrage, a step which greatly annoys Marx because he didn't anticipate that. And, you know, it's funny. He sets this up, and the success of this makes Bismarck really look like a genius, right? He later asked this parliament to pass a bill of indemnity to legalize the illegal taxes that he had been collecting since 1862. And guess what? They did. Ain't nationalism great? So he proved that nationalism and pretty much an authoritarian government could be won. And people start to jump on the bandwagon. As I said, Marx is annoyed because all of a sudden people forgot about misery and suffering. They were participating in the political process. They liked nationalism. They liked feeling like strong Germans. And they were making history. So what else could be better? Bismarck predicted this. He felt that peasants and artisans were conservative at heart and could be a valuable tool for the conservatives. So go back and ask them to let you do what you've been doing to them. That's basically it, you know, and he played them like a fiddle. And this is really, you know, the epitome of using those forces for your own benefit, for your own good, and that is realpolitik, okay? The results here were disastrous for Austria. You know, by 1866, losing the 7 Weeks' War, they know that they have to do something. The concert is over. Austria is pretty much left on its own to fight the separatist will of Hungarians and the Slavs within its empire. We kind of talked about that already. And so with conflicts and revolts growing too frequent and expensive in the process in the 1850s and 60s, they moved to make a compromise after the 7 Weeks' War. And what they do is they decide to become the dual monarchy. And so now Austria shares its name with Hungary. This is where Austria becomes Austria-Hungary in 1867. Both the Hungarian regions and the Slavic regions in Croatia and Serbia would now govern themselves independently. However, both Hungarians and Slavs agreed to still cooperate with the Austrians in terms of war and foreign policy. But they get to govern themselves, make their own decisions, speak in their own language when it comes to domestic issues. And the emperor that was in power that did this was Emperor Franz Joseph. And if you remember, his son was Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And interestingly enough, that is going to be the spark that begins World War I. So Bismarck, guys, he's not done. He continues with his plan. And the southern German states remained out of the North German Confederation. So what to do? What to do? These states, including Alsace, Bavaria, had at one time allied themselves with France. So Bismarck and most Germans could see a conflict in the future with France. Bismarck thought a war with France would frighten the German states into joining his confederation. But that's kind of odd because Napoleon III also felt that a war with Germany, if he won it, would bring him more support that he badly needed. By the mid-1860s, after the Crimean War and an economic downturn, Napoleon III kind of found himself, and again, this is Louis Napoleon, who became Napoleon III in terms of the empire, you know, started to become unpopular as an authoritarian leader. And again, you have to make sure that the economy is good. So there's some internal turmoil and unrest. And he thinks, if I can just win another war, people will love me. And, you know, France, let's face it, they're a little bit uneasy about this ever-growing powerful neighbor in Prussia. And this might be the opportunity that they both need. All right. So Bismarck wants an opportunity to arrive, and as a real politician, he does that. And the opportunity begins with Spain. When the government collapses, the throne is offered to a Hohenzollern cousin who lives in Prussia. You know, and this is kind of like if you remember the War of Spanish Succession. What's going to happen? Is this going to be a Bourbon? Now they're talking about bringing in a Hohenzollern ruler, and the Hohenzollerns turned this opportunity down 3 times, mainly because France and Napoleon was adamantly opposed. You know, again, France doesn't want to be surrounded by Hohenzollerns, just like France didn't want to be surrounded by Habsburgs under Richelieu. But Bismarck persuades the Spanish to offer the throne to the Hohenzollern for the 4th time. He's stirring the pot, you see. King William is still a little bit frightful of France. Bismarck is not scared. Now, Bismarck will only fight a war that he pretty much knows that he can win. So he considers France, industrial and everything, out of Prussia's league. And he knows the idea of a Prussian prince on the throne might aggravate and provoke the French into declaring war on Prussia. That's what he wants. So this time, the throne, make sure it's accepted by Leopold, a Hohenzollern. And the French are, they make sense. They're not happy. And they make a demand publicly that Leopold withdraw his acceptance. And he actually does. And, Bismarck can't control what Leopold does or what the Hohenzollerns want to do. So he's kind of feeling helpless here. He's a little bit disappointed. And as it seemed that things were settled, that's when he goes and finds an opportunity. But the French, being, prideful people that they are, Napoleon III, take things a step further. And they demand that never in the future will a Hohenzollern ever become a candidate for the Spanish throne. Napoleon III couldn't help himself. He had to open his mouth for the publicity to sound powerful and authoritative. He should have said nothing. Sometimes it's best to say little. The King of Prussia relays a telegram back to France and gives it to Bismarck for review. Bismarck takes this telegram, known as the M's telegram, and doctors it up so it's insulting to the French, an attack on French national pride. It's a catalyst for war, and basically Bismarck doctors this telegram, cuts, pastes, scratches things out, adds a few things, and adds vitriol, and publicly this is released, and the French feel snubbed and insulted, and instead of saying nothing, the decaying empire of Napoleon III unwisely is provoked to declare war on Prussia. Bismarck's cunning worked. The war broke out. France had no allies. They were isolated because of its previous aggressive entanglements. And Bismarck, if you think about it, had been isolating them for about a decade. The war began on July 19th, 1870, and by September 2nd, the French surrendered at Sedan. Unbelievable. And Napoleon III found himself surrendered and was held prisoner. This is a picture of the two talking at the Battle of Sedan. Paris refused to capitulate, even though Napoleon III was, now a prisoner. It fortified itself. Remember, France is pretty radical, Paris, and thus began the Great Siege of Paris. Bombardment began on January 4th, 1871. It lasted for 23 days, usually 2 to 5 hours a night. The Parisians refused to be intimidated, but the siege affected the economy. People grew hungry. Food had been running out. The substitute for meat was horse, and it became dogs, cats, rats. The animals at the zoo were eaten, including Castor and Pollux, 2 large elephants that were the pride of Paris. With the provisions exhausted, as in all sieges, it was only a matter of time before the surrender. On January 28, 1871, the gates of the city of Paris were open, and the Germans began peace negotiations and setting the conditions. Outside Paris a few days earlier, a historical event occurred in the Hall of Mirrors at Louis XIV's Versailles. Bismarck assembled the King of Prussia, King Wilhelm, or King William, and other officers, and what they did was they officially declared the German Empire. This was the Second French Empire, and it had collapsed, and it was replaced by the Third French Empire. All right. The Italians took Rome and made it their capital. Russia put warships back in the Black Sea in defiance of the 1856 Treaty of Paris that had ended the Crimean War. France paid a huge indemnity and was occupied by German troops until it was paid. Now think about how that's going to be reversed in World War I. And France ceded Alsace-Lorraine to Germany, a region which was rich in iron deposits with flourishing textiles. So that'll be one of the causes and of revenge for France as well, to get back at Germany in 1914. So, to punish the Germans, financially for the First World War was payback. France will get Alsace-Lorraine back after World War I. Hitler will get it back in World War II, and thus begins the tug of war between Germany and France. This is part, we just talked about that. So Europe would never quite be the same. With the newly unified Germany, German states become the strongest state in all of Europe. William I becomes the Kaiser or Emperor of the Second German Empire, the Second Reich. The First German Empire was the Holy Roman Empire. Anyone want to know what the third one would be? You guessed it, the Third Reich by Adolf Hitler Nationalism carried the day for Bismarck. Nationalism will carry the day for Hitler. From a disunited Germany and the Peace of Westphalia to Confederation of the Rhine to the baby steps of the Zollverein and now unity, Germany was triumphant. Just to verify, these are the slides. This is the slide that you want to make sure is in your notes. Thank you.